Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me well, and if not, let me know or stop me. So I'm very sorry not to be there today, but I'm very happy to be here virtually, and I'm very happy to share my research with you. So the title of this presentation is the title of my PhD, which I'm about to finish in a few months, I hope. Has been delayed for the COVID, but hopefully by January and so on should be finished. So invisible stories are the stories, our stories as language teachers. And I call these stories nomadic stories, and you will see hopefully why. And nomadic is meant not only in a literal sense, it's not meant only as a move between countries, but also as an internal state of mind, as an internal perception of oneself, dealing with many languages and with plural identities, I think. This study has been conducted with 10 teachers who are working with me. So they are colleagues from different parts of the world, from Italy, like myself, from Germany, from France, from India, from Syria, from Italy, another one, from England, from Russia. And this study is based on personal stories, on autobiographical narratives, including myself, and it's based also on a lot of material and objects that the participants, which I call co-researchers, brought into the project. And the project is a co-participatory project in which I work with the colleagues, but also I co-research with them in this journey. And I also use cartographies, which are drawings, maps of one's life. And I use also a final workshop, which I will describe later on. And the interviews, I call them conversations because they were conversation with colleagues more than formal interview, which were open question without a set of questions that was set before. So there were really conversation and discussions between colleagues. And also with the use of poems, also of creativity and creative writing. So these are the tools that I use in my research. And my research is framed within a postmodern, post-structuralist, ontological, epistemological, and methodological framework with the use of post-structuralism theories and post-human theories and nomadic theories, which I hope will be clearer during the talk. I start also with a poem which has been co-created by myself and one of the participants. So I'll read the poem for you because I don't know if you can see well on the screen. So the poem is, I had a dream. That dream was crushed on a day. On a single day, my dream was crushed. It was the dream of my life. I'm living my second dream. Or maybe is it part of my first dream? I'm teaching. I feel like in the middle of an ancient Greek theater. I am in my dream. I survived. I want to tell you my story, other stories, to you, to other people, to make a difference. I survived. I still have a dream. So this is a poem that was part of the research and was created with one of my participants or colleagues who comes from Syria. So the poem is very poignant, it's very powerful because she survived. She's a refugee, but she's also a very well-established professional. And through teaching, she managed to recreate a profession and recreate a new life in a new country. So I call these invisible stories because, as we know, language teachers within the academic context are quite invisible, are quite transparent. They are not, as we heard on other talks this morning, they are not recognized as proper academics. So sometimes they are behind the scenes. But as we can see from the poem that I just read to you, there are also powerful stories. They are also empowering teaching stories and life stories. So they are invisible, but very strong and very powerful. Sorry, there are some problems with sharing this screen. I don't know why. So the questions of my research are these one. What does it mean to you to be a language teacher? What does it mean to teach your mother tongue? So my participants, including myself, were questioning what does it mean to teach your mother tongue? So all of them were teaching their mother tongue, but some of them were teaching also other languages. But the question was around your mother tongue. What does it mean to you teaching your language? And then what does it mean also participating into this research? Because I wanted to have an open view and a sharing experience with them. And also part of the research was bringing an object or a picture that represents yourself as a language teacher, because I was very interested in this poetic, but also in this concrete aspect of the teaching. And then also on the creativity level of drawing yourself as a language teacher. So these were the tools that were part of the research. And these are some examples of my life, my story as a language teacher, which is included in my research. I come from the Dolomites in the north of Italy, on the borders with Austria, Slovenia. So there is a picture of where I'm coming from, and you know, living across different, you know, on a cross of different languages and different identities. That's where I grew up. And then the picture of me in my first day of school, and school was very important. And I think that since the beginning, I really wanted to be a teacher. Then you had a picture of my mother, who was a teacher, not a language teacher, but a teacher. And then a picture of my father, who was a doctor and inspired me to wanted to study and to become a doctor, a different kind of doctor through studying, not a medical doctor. And then you have my running shoes, which are a symbol of my journeys, my nomadic identity, but also are a symbol of my research, of moving through my research in an uneven territory and in jogging around through the research questions. So this is just an example of my narrative, which is what the research was constructed around with my participants. So the research is questioning the link between personal and professional. So this is the central key of the research, and to see how personal instances have an impact and reflect on the professional development and on our professional path, and how we can incorporate personal event into the professional and vice versa. I took inspiration in designing my research from Virginia Woolf and from the concept of fluidity, of life as a fluid element like water. I made and remade continually. Different people draw different words from me. Let us again pretend that life is a solid substance, shaped like a globe, which we turn about in our fingers. Let us pretend that we can make out a plain and logical story, so that when one matter is dispatched, love, for instance, we can go on in orderly manner to the next. So I took this quote, which is central to my research, and I think to my colleagues' journeys, to make a point that life is not linear, that professional life is not linear, that we go through different nomadic stances. And by nomadism, again, it's not just a moving between countries, but a moving between different territories, different internal state of mind. And whatever we do in our professional or personal life, even if we plan very carefully, is never linear, but there is a concept of fluidity, of change and intersectionality. So I can give you a couple of quotes from my participant. When I asked, what does it mean for you to be a language teacher? One answer was, I can represent another point of view that doesn't get to be heard, because it's really important to me, because I feel the other side is not represented. It's people's lives at the end of the day. So you're dealing with people's life, like my life. So again, it's the intersection of personal and professional. That was the first thing, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach, I wanted to educate, I wanted to inform, not educate, to exchange information, because it's an exchange. I wanted to be a bridge. The knowledge I learned, I wanted it to give to people. And then when I came here and was in this situation and I started to teach language, I found important, as I said, to challenge misconception, to challenge the stereotypes, giving him, you know, different points of view, different ideas, so that there was another key moment that made me feel I really wanted to do this, to teach. So in these little quotes, you can see the intersection between personal and professional, and really the powerful voices of wanting to teach and to share knowledge and to share the languages also in our cases. So important is the theoretical background that informed my research. As I said, is framed within post-structuralism. So these are some of my, what I call theoretical friends. You can have a look at them, but I draw particularly from Deleuze and Guattari, from Rosi Braidotti, from the nomadic theory of Rosi Braidotti, from Zygmunt Bauman and the concept of liquidity and liquid modernity, from new materialism, vibrant matter, so the importance of objects and concrete things in research, and then also from psychoanalysis, because I wanted really to draw the link between personal and professional, and on the concept of self-identity and professional identity. And then I drew a lot from autobiographical narratives. One of the key concepts of my research is the concept of rhizome, or rhizome in English, that comes from Deleuze and Guattari. The rhizome, it's a root, and like every root, has no linear development. So the rhizome is a symbol of the way I conceive life and the way I conceive professional development, which is non-linear, which is messy, which is rhizomatic, in which there is an intersection of different stages, and there is a concept of multiplicity and of dynamism and no linear development, which is difficult to accept, but that's, I think, the reality. So the concept of rhizome is strictly linked to the concept of becoming. So my question to my colleagues was, how did you become a language teacher? What made you become a language teacher? So the concept of becoming is, it's part of the rhizome. So becoming is a rhizome, not a classificatory or genealogical tree. Becoming is certainly not imitating or identifying with something. Neither is regressing, progressing, neither is corresponding, establishing corresponding in relation, neither is producing affiliation or producing through filiation. Becoming, it's a verb with a consistency of its own. It does not reduce or lead back to appearing, being, equaling, or producing. So it's the concept of fluidity, of change. And to that important is also the concept of cartography, which is what I use in the research. So cartography are maps, physical maps, but also symbolic maps. So what I asked to my participant was to draw their life as a map. So make a map, not a tracing. What distinguishes the map from the tracing is that it's entirely oriented toward an experimentation in contact with the real. The map does not reproduce an unconscious clause in itself. It constructs the unconscious. It fosters connection between fields. It is itself part of the rhizome. The map is open and connectable in all of its dimensions. It is detachable, reversible, susceptible to constant modification. It can be turned, reversed, adapted to any kind of mounting, reworked by an individual, group, or social formation. It can be drawn on a wall, conceived as a work of art, constructed as a political action or as a mediation. Perhaps one of the most important characteristics of the rhizome is that it always has multiple entryways. So I used the map, the cartography, to, rather than a linear discussion with my colleagues, to have exactly this idea of a nomadic identity, of a moving in between different fields and different territories, and also getting lost, which is what the use of a map is about. And that's the concept of nomadic identity, that we live in permanent process of transition, hybridization, and nomadization. And these in-between states and stages defy the established modes of theoretical representation, precisely because they are zigzagging, not linear, and process-oriented, not concept-driven. So that's a key concept, I think, in all the stories that I analyze with my colleagues, the notion of nomadism, of moving physically between countries, but also of an internal state of mind there. It's very familiar to language teachers. And then there is the psychoanalysis that also enters into my research, and enters particularly in the way I conducted interviews, which were conversation, and in which I left space really for the participant to express what they needed to express, rather than come with conceived and pre-ordered questions. So psychoanalytically inclined researchers like myself start from the position that unconscious processes infiltrate the narrative accounts given by research participants, so that interpretative strategies aim at uncovering these unconscious processes will be needed. This renders psychoanalysis as useful, explaining the way in which external events become incorporated into the psyche or the self, notably through concepts such introjection and identification. So for me, that was important to understand the link between personal and professional. So what the big impact between personal events and professional decisions. And then I use new materialism, which is linked to post-human theories, the importance of objects, of concrete things, so that stories are not just words, but they are embodied, embedded, and they are lived through. So new materialism is giving importance to material and concrete things, which I use in my research. And I'll give you an example right now. So these were the objects that my participant brought to the research. So I asked, bring an object that represents yourself as a teacher. And you can see on the top left, there is a picture which looks like a family, but actually it's a picture of a teacher, a Hindi teacher with her students. So she brought this image as representing herself as a teacher. Just below, there is an image of a language, of a course book that another colleague brought as a representation of himself as a language teacher. Then you have an egg with a counting time, which is an example of the pressure that a language teacher from Russia brought to the research. Then you have Mafalda, who is a funny character from Argentina. And then you have this beautiful dress that a colleague brought to the research, representing herself as an actress in the act of teaching. And then you have this other picture with family members, and then pictures of different qualification and so on. So this is the concept of new materialism. So bringing objects to the research and working with these objects around the symbolic meaning that they have. And these are the cartographies that I work with the participants. So the question was, draw your life as a language teacher and the connection between your personal life and professional life. And I don't have time now to analyze them with you, but you can see the rhizomatic experience, you can see the cartography, you can see the multiple entries that you can have in these drawings. And I work with them, with the participant, trying to unpack them, understand what they meant, and all the post-it that you see around are the symbolic interpretation that were given by the participants. So when I ask, what does it mean this? What do you mean by this drawing? What does represent for you? We were putting post-it to try to interpret the different meaning and to make it into a story that could be representable. And these were, the workshop that we did together, the research process in which I asked them to draw, to cut, to bring objects individually and also collectively. So this is the final workshop in which, again, we were working together around the concept of what does it mean to you to be a language teacher. And this is the result of the workshop. These were the drawing that they did during these workshops. These drawings were transformed into cotton bags that they took with themselves. So at the end of the research, they had these cotton bags with a picture of their life, symbolic life as a language teacher that they drew during the research process. So you can see a tree, you can see a star, you can see this idea of connectivity through the ants, this idea of journey with the footprint, this idea of the universe, so moving around and so on. So you can see how diverse and different they are. And also with them, at the end, I also wrote poems. The one that I read at the beginning is an example. So writing, it's also part of my research, writing as a method of inquiry. So writing is not only my writing in the PhD, but it's the co-writing with the research, with the participants. So I read another poem that was co-written with one of my participants. You know me, I know you. I trust you, you trust me. I know my story, I know your story. I was not supposed to be here. I belong to a different world, to a small world. I moved, I'm here. I can tell you my story. I write stories. I tell stories to my students. I make them laugh. I laugh with them. I'm proud to be here. I wanted to be different, to tell a different story, my story. So this is a poem co-written with an Italian colleague of mine who is also a writer. So that's why there is a lot of, I write stories, and he uses a lot of his writing also to teach the language. And another poem written with a Russian colleague. I'm a chameleon. I move in between countries. I move in between languages. I'm looking for my identity. Who am I? I dance. I dance with words. I dance with my children. I play with them the games of languaging, the games of being a mother. What is a mother? I change my skin many times, not being me, being me. Again, this is co-written with Russian colleagues who moved in between different countries and teaching different languages. I'm aware of time, so I'm moving towards the end of the presentation. So the research journey, as you can see, that I did in my research is quite complex with the use of different methodology, and it's co-participative with my participants and my colleagues. And it's a messy, non-linear journey. There were many interruptions, there were many things in between, also COVID as a last interruption. But the idea is that this messiness of the research, or the complexity of the research, is also represented the complexity of the lives that I am working and researching with. So to summarize the research process that I am embedded with, these are the key words: it's rhizomatic, it's nomadic, it's unstable, fragmented, it's affected and has been affected. I've been affected by all the stories that I work with. It's creative, it's the notion of becoming, it's vibrant, it's transformative, it's entangled, it's empowering, it's embodied, reflective, and so on. So it's quite powerful, has been quite powerful for me and also for the participants, which were throughout the journey very much involved in sharing their life stories with me. And then these are a couple of quotes of, what does it mean to you to teach your language? And then, I can read briefly. It's ultimately liberating. I think I enjoy the ludic part of language use, but I also do find ultimately that is because language manages to slip through like water, a little bit through all these boundaries, and find a little crack that undermines some of the truth that we consider as given and granted and unremovable. It is not just static, it gives this almost physical sensation of elevating yourself. So I don't have time to read the other quotes, but it's just, again, these quotes gives you the idea of that fluidity that I spoke at the beginning when I started the presentation, the fluidity of life, the fluidity of professional identity, the fluidity of being a language teacher. And this concept of nomadism is where I want to finish. In other words, the nomadism that I defend as a theoretical option is also an existential condition, which for me translates into a style of thinking and a mode of relation to writing. My project is to both develop and evoke a vision of critical and feminist subjectivity in a nomadic mode. This mode refers to a figurative style of thinking, slightly autobiographical, which may at times strike the reader as an epistemological stream of consciousness, but it is rigorously constructed around a number of key concepts. So I think this is quite central, this concept of moving in between different fields, different disciplines, different languages, which could feel messy, but at the end there is structure around a number of key concepts. And this comes from Rosi Braidotti. So the final thoughts that you probably are also asking is what to make of these stories, how to make them visible, valuable, acknowledged, and also the impact that these stories might have on training and staff development, which is the main question of my PhD, is how to empower language teachers with their stories, their professional stories, personal stories, into becoming more professional and to enter into the academia with a not just qualification, but with a voice and with an acknowledgement of who they are and how professional they are. So it's really trying, the final point is making even more powerful this link between the personal and the professional. And I stop here because I think we are running out of time, and I don't know if there are any questions. Thank you.
Deleuze and Guattari and the conception of fluid identity from Wolf and how you applied it to the identity of teachers. I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience, and then we can go to the online audience. So is here anyone who would like to ask a question? So I will start with my own question. Donata, do you think that this nomadic or fluid identity is something which is characteristic only of language teachers, or do you think that it can be applied, or if it can be a common feature of teachers in general?
I think it could be it's a common feature of mankind, I think, so not just the teaching profession, but I think it's particularly pertinent to language teachers because of the moving in between countries, the moving in between different languages, which represent the multiple side of our identity. And in many cases, it's also the moving between different disciplines. As we heard in other presentation, language teachers sometimes have different profession because maybe it's not just enough to be a language teacher. So the nomadic experience is also that way to try to integrate different parts of your professional life, not only of your languages and your living in different countries. So I think that it's particularly dear to language teachers. But for example, Rosie Braidotti, which is, embracing this concept, which comes from Deleuze and Guattari, she's not referring to language teacher. She uses the concept in a philosophical way, referring to mankind, to humanity, and then to professional identity. So I use it, I transport it to language teachers. So I think it's not only for language teachers, but particularly powerful, I think, for language teachers.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other question? Or any comment? Anyone that would like to add? Okay, so maybe I would like to ask the question which you used in your, one of the final slides, what to make out of these invisible stories. So do you have an idea how to make the stories of teachers more visible in the conversation about language teaching? Because usually the focus is on students. So is there any way how to make the voice of teachers more prominent in this discourse or discussion?
Well, I think it's reshaping a bit. That's what I'm trying to work also in my job. I'm a program director responsible for training and staff development. So I'm trying to introduce more training that is focused on reflectivity, on self-reflectivity, on working towards your identity as a professional, not only a training that is based on skills and technical skills. We see a lot of language training based on skills, how to teach to write, how to teach to read, and so on, which are important, I'm not denying that, but a lot of time we don't leave space for reflectivity, to reflect on yourself as a professional. So I think giving the space to these stories, it's also opening up for options of having a kind of more holistic teacher training and professional development that leaves space for the personal to emerge and to be recognized and to be empowered and to be listened to in training, but also in professional life. And that might lead to change. For example, also the participants to my research, which I call co-participant because I included them in the research design and project, they were inspired by the research, and some of them went on and are going on in a different research paths. So it's also the sharing that is quite important, and the sharing of personal and professional experiences that might lead up to different openings and to different professional pathways. So yeah, changing a little bit the structure of teacher training, that's my main aim with this research.
Okay, thank you very much, Donata. We are running out of time, but thank you again for the presentation and especially for the poems, which I believe are really beautifully written. And maybe we can leave this question, we can ask ourselves, what does it mean for us to teach language? So maybe that's something we can take outside of this session. So thank you very much, Donata.
Thank you so much.